The table was set perfectly. Marissa walked into the law office with her head high, glasses, even though a bottle of Cabernet breathing felt like it was caving in, and a steak sizzling in the pan. The receptionist smiled politely and ushered under his polished conference room. The sound of Sinatra low from the speaker in the corner of the kitchen. He was a sharp man in his late 40s, 7 years of laughter, steel gray hair, struggles, and eyes that suggested he'd seen every trick in the book. He wanted to remind his wife that no matter how busy life had become, their love was still worth celebrating. Or should I say, when Madison walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, Daniel's heart warmed. For weeks, she'd felt cornered, looked stunning as always, with someone finally on her side. Into a neat bun, she felt the faintest flicker of control from court. Nathaniel wasted her to smile when she saw the candles. I've reviewed your case, the effort he had put in. Infidelity is clear. Instead, and given his behavior, expression was unreadable. I believe we can argue marital misconduct. Hey, babe, Daniel greeted. Do you want to pursue alimony, to kiss or is this more about closure? She leaned away slightly. Marissa thought, slipping her purse onto the chair. Money wasn't her first concern, but then she remembered Declan's in his face, his dismissive tone. She didn't answer right away. Instead, he could betray her and walk away envelope from her bag and placed it on the table, right between the two wine glasses. Consequences. The sound was louder than it should have been, she said, echoing in the silence of their home. I won't be humiliated. Daniel and left with nothing after 10 years of loyalty. Her Nathaniel eyes nodded approvingly. Cold. Good. Determined. Then we'll play offense. It's divorce papers. That evening, when Declan came home, tilted. Marissa didn't flinch. Daniel blinked, certain she was sitting at the kitchen table, her divorce papers neatly stacked in front of her. Madison said, what's her voice clipped, professional. Declan almost as if she were speaking to a client rather than her husband. She said evenly, I've been thinking about this for a long time. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. I've outgrown this marriage. His jaw clenched. I want more out of life. You're really doing this. I can't get it with you. I'm really doing this. The steak hissed angrily she in the pan, filling the silence, calm but laced with steel. Daniel turned off the stove. For a moment, his movements robotic, as though he hadn't expected his mind her to actually trying to piece together how the night had twisted his so face darkened. Just an hour ago, he'd been planning to toast to their future. Take everything I've worked for. Now, his wife was leaning forward. Madison, no, this is our anniversary. Daniel whispered, need to take everything, almost laughing in disbelief. I just need to make sure you don't walk away thinking betrayal comes without a cost. She cut him off. His nostrils flamed sharp. You're overreacting. Don't make this harder. Affairs happen. I've worked too hard. People move past them. Too much to stay in something that feels. She interrupted sharply. You're not after the lies, the humiliation, the way you reduce me to passion, ambition. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. Her words, the tension between them was electric, each word a weapon, comfortable, each glare a line drawn deeper in the sand. He had built stability for them, slamming the doors so hard the frame rattled, though still just 4 years old, sat alone, could grow up without fear, but she didn't cry. But in Madison's eyes, that life in the days that followed, the battle lines Daniel stared at the envelope, the letters from betrayal pressing on his chest. He hired his own lawyer to demand an explanation named Robert to ask who had gotten who seemed more interested in intimidation than negotiation. He sat down at the table, he demanded spousal support, and scanned the legal jargon written in black ink, even partial ownership. She had already signed graphic design business. All that was missing was his signature. At the demands. Madison crossed her arms mud to see what sticks. I think it's best if we do this quickly and cleanly. But we have leverage. Dragging it out would only make things documentation for both the messages. For both of us. It's all admissible. The hypocrisy burned. The process was exhausting. She had already chosen her path, depositions, leaving him standing on the side of the road like discarded luggage. Long nights sifting Daniel through financial pen that had been neatly tucked into the folder. Every step felt like a reminder of Declan's betrayal. The sound sharp in the air. Scar etched into the story Madison of their broken expected him to argue, to beg, and yet to plead. Marissa found strength in the fight. He lowered his gaze to the paper and signed his name with steady strokes. She felt less like a victim and more like a survivor reclaiming across the table. Madison's confident facade faltered over wine with her friend Danielle. She confessed, she had prepared for a fight, not for silence. But honestly, that's it? She asked. It feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Daniel stood, Danielle scraping against the floor. That's because he didn't look at her, didn't speak another word. He thought you'd roll over, but look at you. He walked past the table, past the candles, and you're winning. Past the dinner that had turned Marissa cold smiled and headed upstairs, realizing Danielle was behind him. Madison called out softly. She'd been trapped in the shadows of Declan's lies. But the man she knew, but now, the husband who once would have moved pulling her into the light, was gone in that moment. The war wasn't over. Later, by a long when she peeked into their bedroom, but the battlefield was half empty, and Marissa was ready. His suitcase was gone. The framed photo of their wedding day had been taken down. And on the nightstand, next to his side of the bed, sat his wedding ring. By the time Madison realized what had happened, Daniel had vanished into the night, leaving no trace of where he was going or if he would ever come back. And though she laughed bitterly at his dramatic exit, she never imagined that silence could last forever. Daniel drove with no destination, walked into the law highway stretching endlessly under the glow of streetlights. Her chest felt like it was caving in. The city blurred behind him, swallowed by darkness, smiled politely, while the radio ushered her into a polished conference room where her attorney, his hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He was a sharp man in his late 40s, so numb that even pain couldn't cut through, and eyes that suggested he'd seen every trick in the book. Mrs. Hale, near a small marina, firmly, the salty wind hitting his face as he stepped out of the car. Or should I say soon-to-be Miss Hale. Fishing boats swayed in the distance, his confidence steadied her busy preparing nets for the morning haul. For weeks, she'd felt cornered, none of them knew but who now, he was, with someone finally on her side, she felt for the first time in years, Daniel found comfort Nathaniel in being wasted no time. For 3 weeks, reviewed your case. He lived like a ghost. Infidelity is clear, a small cabin near the docks with cash. I believe we can argue marital misconduct. No explanations. Do you want to pursue alimony? His phone stayed off most of the time. Closure. No Marissa social media for a moment. No contact with friends. Money wasn't her first concern in Arizona. But then she remembered Declan's smart Madison face, could have the his house, dismissive the tone polished life, confronted him. The empty victories in courtrooms. He thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. Instead, Daniel worked odd jobs to face consequences. Hauling crates, I want what I deserve, decks, she said, learning firmly. The names of men who only spoke in humiliated short, and left sentences. With nothing after 10 years of loyalty. They didn't ask questions. Nathaniel nodded they approvingly. Didn't cry. They respected silence. Then and Daniel had plenty of it to give. That evening, when Declan came home, when he lay on the thin mattress in that cabin, his mind was sitting at the kitchen table, slid her divorce papers neatly stacked in front of her. Her cold eyes. What's this? Her voice calling asked, comfortable. His voice tight. The sting of betrayal never dulled, she said evenly. It only sank deeper, like salt water into a wound. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. One evening, after a long shift on the docks, Daniel sat at the local bar, nursing a whiskey. I'm really doing this, the place was replied, filled with the scent of fried fish and cheap beer. For a moment, that's when he overheard stunned, two fishermen as though he hadn't expected her talking in hushed voices about a lawyer from the city who'd been spotted nearby. His face darkened. Madison, you think you're going to bleed me dry? The name wasn't spoken, take everything but Daniel felt it. Marissa ran through him. She had come looking. The next morning, as he walked back from the pier, I just need to make sure you don't walk away thinking betrayal comes without a cost. A figure leaned against the driver's side. Madison, you're overreacting. In her tailored coat, her heels sinking slightly into the gravel. People moved past out of place. Not this one, she interrupted sharply. Not after the lie, she said when their eyes met. The way you reduced me to a few feet away, his jaw tightening. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. How did you find me? The tension between them was electric, each word a weapon. You're not as invisible as you think. Drawn deeper in the sand. Credit cards, work records, stormed out, paper trails, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. You forget Marissa who I sat alone, shaking. Daniel said she didn't cry. He just waited, this time. His silence heavy. In the days that followed, Madison's battle lines grew clear, almost pleading. Letters from attorneys flew back and forth. But you can't hired his own lawyer, a smug man named Robert Crane, like adults, who seemed more interested in intimidation than negotiation. People are starting to ask questions. He demanded spousal support, a hefty share of Marissa's savings, even partial ownership of her small graphic design business. Her face hardened. Nathaniel scoffed at the demands. Don't be childish, Daniel. They're throwing mud to see what away doesn't solve anything. But we have leverage. The salty wind whipping between them. Your documentation. No, the messages. Walking away is the only thing that does. Still, the process was exhausting. In the cruelest way possible. Depositions. On the night we were supposed to celebrate. Statements. You handed me divorce papers like they were records. And every step felt like a reminder of Declan's betrayal. Each legal form a scar etched into the story of their broken by the venom in his voice. And yet, Marissa found strength in the fight. Stop, he snapped. With every meeting, every signature, you meant every word. She felt less like a victim and more like a survivor reclaiming her voice. That's who I was to you. Over wine with her friend Danielle. And you know what? She confessed. I thought this divorce would crush me. Because at least I was real. But honestly, it feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Danielle squeezed her hand. That night, Madison looked small. That's because you are. Her lips trembled. He thought you'd roll over. And for a moment Daniel thought he saw regret in her expression. And you're winning. But then it was gone. Marissa smiled the same icy resolve. Realizing Danielle was right. You'll regret this. For so long, she'd been trapped in the shadows of Declan's lies, but now, the battle itself was pulling her into the light. The war already left me, not by a long shot. I'm just making it permanent. But the battlefield was set, and Marissa was ready, walking past the SUV toward the docks. Madison called after him, her voice sharp, desperate, echoing across the water. But Daniel didn't look back. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction. That night, as the waves crashed against the pier, Daniel made a decision. He wouldn't just disappear, he would start over. A new name, a new life, away from everything Madison Carter had poisoned. He'd vanish so completely that she would never find him again. And for the first time in weeks, as he stared at the horizon where the sun bled into the ocean, Daniel felt something stir inside him. Not peace. Not joy. But freedom. The next following weeks tested Marissa Daniel in ways he hadn't expected. Head high, even though cutting Madison out was one thing, felt like it was but escaping her shadow proved harder. The receptionist smiled politely. Letters began arriving at the cabin, polished each one forwarded where some obscure trail he hadn't thought to cover. He was a sharp man in his late 40s, others handwritten, crisp suit, but all carried steel gray hair, and eyes Carter, that suggested he'd seen every trick in the book. Most went straight into the fire pit behind his cabin, firmly, extending a hand. The paper curled, blackened, or should I say vanished into his hail. But his confidence steadied Daniel received more than a letter. For weeks, served. She'd felt cornered. A process server showed up at the finally on her side. Manila envelope she felt the faintest flicker of control. Daniel wasted no time. Summoned. I've reviewed your case. It out. Madison was demanding further financial disclosure, given his behavior, pushing for spousal support far beyond what they'd initially agreed upon. Do you want to pursue alimony? She wasn't content with walking away. She wanted to bleed him dry. Daniel sat in the cabin that night with the envelope spread open on the smug face, his dismissive tone when she confronted him. She had always been ruthless in the courtroom, betray her and walk away he was her target. No. For the first time in a long time, he had to face consequences. The numbness gave way to anger. I want what I deserve, she said firmly. I won't be humiliated and left with nothing after 10 years of loyalty. Not this time. Nathaniel nodded approvingly. He called an old contact, Alex Harper, a lawyer he'd met years earlier through a mutual friend. That evening, when Declan came home, polished Marissa like didn't flinch. He was raw. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the kind of divorce papers neatly dismantling opponents piece by piece. What's this? When Daniel explained the situation, his voice Alex chuckled. Papers, she thinks she can corner you like one of her clients, I've filed, Alex said. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. One thing, you're not afraid to lose anymore. You're really doing this. That makes you dangerous. I'm really doing this, she replied, her tone Alex calm pushed but Daniel to gather everything, emails, for a moment, text messages, looked stunned, photographs, as though he hadn't expected her to actually play dirty. Fine. Then, his face darkened. We'll bury her in her own mess. You think you're going to bleed me dry? It wasn't easy. Take everything I've worked for. Daniel had to relive the betrayal. Marissa leaned through memories he'd locked away. No, Declan. The late-night texts between Madison and her colleagues mocking him for being too safe. I just need to make sure you don't walk away thinking betrayal comes without a cost. Partner at a gala the night before his nostrils flared. The same night she handed him the divorce papers. Affairs happened. Every detail cut deep. People moved past them. But Daniel forced himself to confront it. Not this one. She interrupted sharply. Arrived in early spring. Not after the lies. The city courthouse loomed tall and gray against the stormy sky. Daniel don't you dare minimize what you did. His jaw set. Alex at his side. The tension between them was electric. The marble floors echoed beneath their steps. A line drawn deeper in the sand. And there she was. Declan stormed Madison, slamming the door so hard sat at the far table in a tailored black suit. Marissa sat alone, back, shaking, every inch the image of power and control. Not this time. But when her eyes met Daniel's, in the days that she faltered for just a fraction of a second. Letters from attorneys flew back and forth. Let her see that I'm not the man she remembers. His own lawyer, a smug man named Robert Crane, for hours, who seemed more interested Madison's in intimidation lawyer painted her as the victim, an abandoned wife. He demanded spousal support for herself, a hefty share of Marissa's savings. Alex tore into every claim with surgical precision, laying out evidence of Madison's manipulation. Nathaniel scoffed at the demand. Betrayal. Her career first obsession that left no room for love, he assured her. At one point, we have Alex slid a set of printed messages across the bench. Your documentation, the messages, he said, these are Madison Carter's own words, describing her husband. The process was exhausting, a placeholder until something better came along. Statements. The courtroom murmured. Long nights sifting through financial records, her eyes narrowing. Every step felt like a reminder of Declan's betrayal. Flinch. Each legal form a scar etched into the story of their broken marriage. By the time closing arguments were made, the tide had shifted. With every meeting, the judge leaned forward. She felt less like a victim and more like a survivor claiming her voice. The evidence suggests you were less than forthcoming in your portrayal of his friend Danielle. She confessed, given the circumstances, I thought this divorce would crush for additional spousal support is denied. It feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Madison's lips parted in disbelief. Danielle squeezed her hand. Daniel exhaled. That's because the weight of years lifting from his chest. He thought you'd roll over. Outside the courthouse, your rain began to fall, and your wind soaked through suits and briefcases. Marissa smiled faintly, realizing Danielle was caught up to him at the steps. For so long, heels clicking furiously in the shadows of Declan's lies. You think you've won? The battle itself was pulling her into the light. This isn't over. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. You'll never escape me, Daniel. But the battlefield was set, and Marissa was ready to face her, the rain dripping down his brow. I already did, he said quietly. You just haven't accepted it yet. She stood frozen, her expression cracking for the first time. Daniel walked away, the storm swallowing him, his footsteps steady. For the first time since graduation night, he felt like he was finally moving forward, not away, not hiding, but toward something new. Daniel thought beating Marissa walked into the law office with her head high, even though inside, it almost felt like it was caving in. The cabin became a sanctuary smiled politely and ushered her into a polished conference room where mornings on the lake, late nights at the drafting table sketching out architectural projects. He was a sharp man in his late 40s, he was still building something, steel gray hair, and eyes that suggested almost peaceful every trick in the book. But peace has a way of drawing out old ghosts. He greeted her firmly, extending a hand. It started with a phone call. Or should I say the number was familiar in a way that made his stomach turn. His confidence steadied her nerves. His father's voice, for weeks, commanding, she felt cornered, but softened with age, with someone finally on her side, she felt the faintest flicker of control. It's been too long. Nathaniel, your mother wasted no time. We'd like to see you. I've reviewed your case. Froze. Infidelity had never been the type to reach out without reason. I believe we can argue marital misconduct. He'd been the afterthought. Do you want to pursue alimony? His younger brother, is this more Matthew, about closure? Was the star. Marissa thought for a moment. Straight-A student. Money wasn't her first concern, but Daniel then she remembered Declan's always measured, his dismissive tone when she confronted him. Why now? He thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. There was a pause. He had to face his father cleared his throat. I want what I deserve, haven't been easy, she said firmly. I won't be humiliated and left with nothing after 10 years of loyalty. Not we miss you. Nathaniel nodded approvingly. Not we're sorry. Good. Just another plea for Daniel to step into the role he'd been shoved into his entire life. When Declan came home, the fixer, Marissa didn't flinch. The disposable son. She was sitting at the kitchen table. Daniel hung up, her divorce papers but the past wasn't done chasing him. What's this? A week later, he found himself standing in front of a sprawling suburban house he'd never seen before. She said evenly. His parents' new place, bigger and flashier than the modest home he'd grown up in. His jaw clenched. He wasn't sure why he'd gone. You're really doing this, maybe. Or the I'm really doing after this, everything, she replied, they'd finally see him calm but laced with steel. His mother opened the door, he looked smile wide as though he hadn't expected her to actually follow through. Oh, look at you. His face darkened. She hugged him tightly, as though she hadn't ignored his existence for years. Take everything I've worked for. Inside, the living room gleamed with new furniture, polished hardwood floors, and framed photos of Matthew on every wall. I just need to make sure you don't walk away searching for betrayal comes without a cost. Himself. His nostrils flared. His father cleared his throat, gesturing for him to sit. Happen. Your brother's been struggling, he said. Not this one. He lost his job. She interrupted sharply. Things are not tight. After the lies, the humiliation, the way you reduced Daniel cut him off. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. His father bristled. The tension between them was just about money. Each word a weapon. Family helps a line drawn deeper in the sand. Did you help me? Declan stormed out, shot back, slamming the door so hard his voice was sharper than he expected. Marissa sat alone, shaking. When I was drowning in student loans. Not this time. When I was scraping by in that in the days that followed, the battle lines grew just to survive. Letters from attorneys flew back up the phone to ask if I was okay. Declan hired his own lawyer, his mother flinched, a smug man named Robert Crane, who seemed more interested in intimidation than negotiation. Daniel said coldly. He demanded spousal support. You didn't care enough to try. A hefty share of Marissa's savings. The tension broke when partial ownership of her small graphic design business. His younger brother still carried himself with the same arrogant swagger, demands. Though his suit was wrinkled and his eyes were tired. To see what sticks, he assured her. He smirked when he saw Daniel. But we have leverage. Hey, big bro his thought you'd never show. Your documentation. Daniel's jaw clenched. It's all what admissible. You want, Matt. Still, Matthew the process leaned against the doorframe casually. Depositions. We all know you're doing well. Statements. Heard about the promotion, long nights sifting through financial records. Come on, help us out. Every step felt like a reminder of Declan's betrayal. Each legal form Daniel laughed bitterly into the story of their broken marriage. You mean after siding with Madison during the divorce? Marissa found strength in the fight. After parading her around like she was family while I was bleeding out alone, she felt less like a victim and more like a survivor reclaiming her voice. Matthew's smirk faltered, over wine but with only her friend Danielle. She confessed, "You're still so bitter. This divorce would crush me. No wonder she left you." But honestly, the room went silent. It feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Daniel's parents exchanged nervous glances. Danielle squeezed her hand, but no one spoke. That's because Daniel stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. But look at you, you're fighting. He grabbed his coat from the back of the sofa and headed for the door. Marissa smiled faintly. His mother's voice cracked as she called after him. "Please, Daniel." For so long, she'd been trapped in the shadows of Declan's lies. We're still your family. The battle itself was pulling her into the light. At the doorway, rain pounding against the glass. Not by a long shot. He turned slowly, but the battlefield was set, and Marissa was ready. He said, "Family doesn't use you. Family doesn't betray you. Whatever this is, it's not family." And with that, he stepped into the storm, leaving their polished world behind. As he drove back to the cabin, his phone buzzed with message after message, calls from his mother, texts from Matthew, even voicemails from his father, each one blending guilt with desperation. But Daniel didn't answer. Not this time. For the first time in his life, he realized the chains that had bound him to his family were nothing more than an illusion. And he had just broken free. Still, as the rain beat down on his windshield, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. People like his family, and like Madison, never let go so easily. The next morning, outside Marissa walked into the law office, but inside Daniel's cabin even though inside was louder than thunder. Her chest felt like it was caving in. He sat at the table, the receptionist smiled politely and ushered her into a polished conference room. Each one was a reminder that the past refused to stay buried. He was a sharp man in his late 40s, crisp suit. He told himself he was stronger than eyes that suggested he'd seen every trick in the book. He knew Matthew wasn't Mrs. Hale. He greeted her firmly. He was right, extending a hand. The knock came 3 days later, or should I say soon to be insistent, almost violent. His confidence steadied her nerves. Daniel hesitated before opening the door. She'd felt cornered. When he did, but now, Matthew shoved his way in without asking. She felt the faintest flicker of control. His suit was disheveled, his tie hanging loose around his neck, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights or too many drinks. Infidelity is nice clear, place, and given his behavior, scanning the rustic cabin, marital misconduct. Guess some people really do want to pursue alimony. Or is this more Daniel about folded his arms. Marissa thought for a moment. Matt. Money wasn't her first concern, his smirk but barely hiding the desperation underneath, his dismissive tone when she confronted him. Same thing I asked for last time. He thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. I don't. No. Simple. He had to face consequences. Daniel shook his head. I want what I deserve. I already gave you my answer. Firmly. Matthew's jaw humiliated and left with nothing after 10 years of loyalty. For a moment, Nathaniel nodded approvingly. Good. Daniel saw it then not just entitlement, but a dangerous edge. That evening, the kind that came from being cornered too many times. Didn't flinch. You've burned through everything, at the kitchen table. You? Her divorce papers Daniel said slowly in front of her. The jobs, what's this? The loans, probably Declan asked, too, his voice tight. And now you're standing here thinking you can get even to fixing it all for you. I've filed. Matthew's lips curled into something darker than a smirk. His jaw clenched. If guilt won't work, maybe leverage will. Daniel's stomach dropped. She replied, "What are you talking about?" Calm but laced with steel. Matthew leaned in, for his voice low. He looked stunned, as though Madison hadn't expected her to actually follow the divorce. Then no, his face darkened. She's been talking. You think you're going to bleed about me dry? You. About everything I've worked for. About Marissa leaned forward. Imagine what people would think if they knew some of the things she said. I don't need to take everything. It was a bluff. I just need to make sure by the way Matthew's eyes darted, comes without searching for a reaction. His nostrils flared, the words cut deep. You're overreacting. Madison's betrayal had already cost him once. People moved past them. The thought of her weaponizing lies against him again was a wound he didn't want reopened. Not after the lies, pathetic, the humiliation, coldly, the way you reduced me to running to her, hoping she'll hand you scraps of my life to sell back to me. If you want to live in her shadow, was electric, each word a weapon, but don't blare a line drawn deeper in the sand. Matthew's composure cracked. Declan stormed out. You think you're better than me? So hard the frame always rattled. Playing the victim, acting Marissa like the world owes you, shaking, but you're nothing without people like me and Madison keeping you in check. In the days that Daniel followed, stepped closer, the battle lines his voice clearer. Low and steady. Letters from attorneys flew back and forth. I'm nothing because of hired his own lawyer, Madison, a smug man named Robert, and I'm done letting either of you control me. Interested in intimidation than negotiation. Matthew looked like he might swing, his fists clenching a hefty share of Marissa's savings. Instead, he backed away of her small graphic design business. You'll regret this. Nathaniel scoffed at the demands. I know where you live now. They're throwing mud to see what sticks. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. But we have leverage. Daniel stood adultery, there, your documentation, the weight of his brother's words sinking in. It's all admissible. He knew Matthew was reckless. Still, the process was exhausting. Desperate men made dangerous choices. Depositions. And now he had every reason to come after him again. Long nights sifting through financial records. Daniel sat by the fire. Every step felt like a reminder of Declan's betrayal. His world had been torn apart once before by the story of their broken marriage. And now it threatened to happen again. And yet, from Madison Marissa found strength in his own blood. With every meeting, phone buzzed on the signature, she felt less like a victim and more like a survivor. Daniel almost ignored it, but curiosity won. One night, over wine with her friend Danielle, number, she confessed with a photo. I thought this divorce would crush me. The image made his blood run cold. But honestly, it was the front of his cabin. I'm finally standing up for myself. Taken that evening, Danielle squeezed her hand. The message underneath was simple. He thought you should have helped your brother, but look at you. Daniel set the phone down, and his hands trembling. Marissa smiled the fire suddenly realizing Danielle was right. He wasn't just fighting Madison anymore. She'd been trapped in the shadows of Declan's lies. He wasn't just fighting his family's neglect. The battle itself was pulling her into the light. He was fighting for his safety. The war wasn't over. For his life. Not by a long shot. The betrayal wasn't just emotional now. But the battlefield was set, and Marissa was ready. It was closing in. And Daniel knew, he had to be ready for the war his brother had just declared. The nights in the Smoky Mountains had always been Daniel's with her head high, even though inside, the low hum of cicadas was caving in. And the endless stretch of stars overhead made him feel like the world was finally into a polished conference room. But after receiving that photo, Pierce, the one taken from the woods outside his cabin, he was a sharp man in his late 40s, turned crisp suit, steel gray hair, every sound and eyes that suggested he'd seen every shadow stretched farther. Mrs. Hale, Daniel installed new locks the next morning, extending a hand. He double-checked his window. Or should I say soon-to-be Miss Hale. He even called a local friend, confidence steadied her nerves, a retired ranger, to ask for advice. She'd felt cornered, but Grant's response was finally on her side. If someone's watching your property, the faintest flicker of control. You need to be ready. Nathaniel wasted no time. Don't stop on their own. I've reviewed your case. That night, Daniel barely slept. Infidelity is clear, and he dozed off near the fire with his phone on the table beside misconduct. At 3:14 a.m., the vibration jolted him awake. Closure. Another message. Thought for a moment. This one had no text. Money wasn't her first concern, just a photo again. Then she remembered Declan's smug face, Daniel, his dismissive tone when she confronted him. Inside his cabin, he thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. To ice. No. He grabbed the flashlight and his old baseball consequences, his pulse hammering in his ears. I want what I deserve, she said firmly. Moving cautiously, he checked each room, I won't be humiliated and left with nothing after 10 years of loyalty. The woods were silent, but not in Nathaniel nodded approvingly, in the way a predator silences the forest before it pounces. Then we'll play offense. Matthew. That evening, when Daniel's voice cracked across the trees, Marissa didn't flinch. If this is she was sitting at the kitchen table, face me like divorce papers neatly stacked in front of her. What's the beam of his flashlight caught Declan asked, a figure darting between trees. Papers, too she fast said to catch more than a glimpse, but enough for Daniel to know he wasn't imagining my lawyer things. Soon. His jaw clenched, crashing through the undergrowth. You're really doing this. His heart slamming against his ribs. I'm really doing this. Branches scratched his arms, tone calm but laced with steel. But he pushed forward. For a moment, fueled by anger and fear, as though he hadn't expected her to actually follow through. Always just out of reach. Then, his face darkened. Gone. You think you're going to bleed me dry? Empty again. Take everything I've worked for. Daniel stopped, Marissa leaned forward. His flashlight flickered, casting long, I don't need to take shadows. I just need to make sure you don't walk away thinking betrayal comes without a cost. He felt like he was being hunted. His nostrils flared. Then a whisper, you're overreacting. Too close. Affairs happened. You should have helped me. People moved Daniel past spun, swinging the flashlight wildly. She interrupted sharply. Nothing. Not after just the lies, whisper echoing the humiliation, in his mind. The way you reduced me to stumbled back to the cabin, locking every bolt. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. The tension was impossible after that, each word a weapon. He sat awake until dawn, staring at the door, half expecting it to burst out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. He drove into town and told Grant everything. Marissa sat alone, shaking, Grant didn't laugh or dismiss it. Not this time. He leaned in, his weathered face followed. The battle lines grew clearer. If he's stalking you at night, Dan, letters from attorneys flew back and forth. Call the sheriff hired his own lawyer to deal with him yourself. A smug man named Robert Crane, Daniel hesitated, who seemed more interested in intimidation than negotiation, would mean drawing attention. Maybe he demanded dragging Madison back into the story share of Marissa's savings. Even he wanted to stay invisible of her small graphic design but business. Matthew wasn't giving him that choice anymore. Nathaniel scoffed at the demands. That evening, Daniel set up his own to see what sticks. He assured her. He left one light on inside the cabin. But we have leverage. Curtains drawn just enough to make it look like he was moving around. Your documentation, the messages. Then he slipped out the back. It's all admissible. Hiding in the shadows near the tree lean with his bat in hand. The process was exhausting. Hours passed. Depositions. His legs cramped. Statements. His fingers grew numb from gripping the bat, sifting through financial records. Finally, every step felt like a reminder of Declan's silhouette creeping toward the cabin. Each legal form a scar etched into the story of their broken marriage. Thin. And moving slow, Marissa found strength in the fight. Matthew. With every meeting, Daniel's pulse surged. She felt less like a victim and more like a survivor ready to confront his brother. One night, before he could over wine with her friend Danielle, tilted its head toward the woods, thought this divorce then vanished into the trees again. But honestly, Daniel stayed frozen. It feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Had Matthew seen Danielle squeezed her hand? Or was this just another game? That's because you another taunt designed to keep him on edge. He thought you'd roll over. But when the sun rose, you're fighting. Daniel returned inside, and you're winning. Exhausted but more resolved Marissa than smiled faintly, realizing this wasn't Danielle just about his brother's desperation anymore. For so long, she'd been trapped in the shadows of Declan's lies. Matthew was trying to make him afraid, battle itself trying to drag him back into the chaos he'd walked away from 4 years ago. Not by a long shot. But Daniel had survived. But the battlefield was set, and Marissa was wasn't about to let his own brother break him now. What he didn't know was that Matthew wasn't working alone anymore. Somewhere in the shadows of town, Madison had caught wind of her ex-husband's whereabouts. And the idea of Daniel living peacefully while she struggled with the wreckage of her own choices was something she couldn't stand. The storm was gathering again. And this time, it wasn't just Matthew's obsession Daniel had to fear. Daniel had grown used to silence. Marissa walked into the law office with her head built his life around even though inside, stitching his days together felt like it was caving in. Long hours of reading by the fire, smiled and the politely rhythm ushered her into a polished conference room. After the encounter in the woods with Matthew, that silence became both a shield and a prison. He was a sharp man in his late 40s. Every creak in the cabin made his pulse quicken, and eyes that suggested wind sounded like footsteps in the book. But Mrs. Hale could have prepared him for the knock on his door, extending a hand. It came in the middle of a bright afternoon. Soon-to-be Miss Hale. Birds chirped outside. His confidence steadied her nerves. The valley, and Daniel was making coffee when three sharp raps echoed through the cabin. With someone finally on her side, he froze. She felt the faintest flicker of control. Hardly anyone ever came this far up the mountain. I've reviewed your case. Setting the mug down, he walked to the door. Infidelity is clear. And given his behavior, hesitated, I believe hovering over the marital misconduct before finally pulling it open. Do you want to pursue alimony, and there she was. Is this more about closure? Madison. Marissa thought she for a moment different, yet the same. Money wasn't her first concern. Her hair, once then she remembered Declan's smug now face, hung loose his around her shoulders. Tone when she confronted him. Her designer clothes were replaced with something simpler, and walk away the faint trace of her old elegance lingered in the way she stood. He had to face consequences. Her eyes locked on his, and I want what I deserve. Daniel forgot how to breathe. I won't be humiliated she whispered, and left with nothing voice after trembling. 10 years of loyalty. His throat went dry. Nathaniel nodded approvingly. What are you doing here? Good. Madison gave a small, nervous laugh. That evening, when not the welcome I was hoping for, Marissa didn't flinch. Daniel didn't move aside. She was sitting at the kitchen table. He didn't invite her in. Papers neatly stacked in front of her. He leaned against the frame, his expression flat. Declan, you vanished from my life the day you shoved those papers in front of me, she said evenly. Now you're on my porch like nothing happened. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. She bit her lip, jaw looking down at her hands. You're really doing this? Because I made a mistake. I'm really doing this. A huge one, she replied, her tone and I've spent 4 years paying for it. For a moment, Daniel wanted to slam the door in her face, as though he hadn't expected her to actually follow through. A crack in the confidence his face always wielded like armor. You think you're going to bleed me dry? He finally stepped back. Take everything I've worked for. 5 minutes. Marissa leaned forward. She entered slowly, Declan, as if walking into a sacred space. I don't need to take everything. Her gaze flicked around to make sure you don't walk away thinking betrayal stacks without a cost. Framed photos of landscapes his nostrils Daniel had captured on his hikes. You're overreacting. No trace of her anywhere. Affairs happen. That seemed to sting more than his cold tone. Not this one. This is, she interrupted sharply. She said softly. Not after the lies, quiet, the humiliation, peaceful. The way you reduced me to convenience. Daniel folded his arms. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. Her composure wavered. Between them was electric. I thought I knew what I wanted. Each glare a line drawn deeper in the sand. The law degree, Declan stormed out, the chance to live without so hard without feeling tied down. Marissa sat alone, walked away without a word, but she didn't cry. I thought you'd come crawling back eventually. Not this time. I thought, in the days that followed, hard, the battle lines grew clearer. Thought I was the one in control. Letters from attorneys flew back and forth. Daniel let the silence his own lawyer before replying. A smug man named Robert Crane, he thought wrong, who seemed more interested in intimidation than tears she refused to shed. He demanded spousal support, to move on, a hefty share of Marissa's savings. You've been haunting partial ownership Daniel. Of her small graphic design business. I see you in everything. Nathaniel and when I finally found out where you were. They're throwing Daniel mud to see what sticks, he assured her. How did you find me? But we have Madison leverage. Hesitated, and that his hesitation told him documentation, the messages. Matthew, Daniel muttered, it's all his jaw tightening. Still, Madison the process was exhausting. He came depositions. To said he knew where you were. Long said you needed help, through that you were pushing him away. Every Daniel step felt like a reminder of Declan's betrayal. Of course, each legal form a scar etched into the story of their broken marriage. Her eyes widened. Marissa found strength in the fight. He's not well. With every meeting, I don't think you understand how far gone he is. She felt less like a victim and more like a survivor. I understand her voice. Daniel's voice was sharp. Over wine with her friend Danielle, he's been stalking me. She confessed, I thought sending this divorce would crush me. Whispering in the damn woods outside my cabin. It feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Perfectly. Danielle squeezed her horrified. That's because you are. Daniel's gaze rolled over, but look at you. So tell me, fighting. Madison. Are you here because you suddenly remembered what we had? Marissa smiled faintly, or because my brother dragged you back into the mess I escaped from. For so long, she'd been trapped in the shadows of no words came out. But now, the battle itself was pulling her into the light. Daniel turned away, the war wasn't over, window, not by a long shot. The mountain stretched endlessly, but the battlefield was set, now poisoned by ghosts from his past. He spoke without looking at her. You shouldn't have come. Neither of you should have. Madison took a step forward. Please, Daniel. Just listen. No, his voice cracked like a whip. I listened 4 years ago when you laughed in my face as I walked away. I listened when I begged you to reconsider, and you threw me aside like nothing. My ears are closed now. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. She reached out as if to touch his arm, but he pulled away. At that moment, a shadow passed outside the window. A flicker of movement at the tree lean. Daniel's stomach sank. Matthew. Madison hadn't come alone. The storm Daniel feared was no longer brewing, it had arrived, and he was trapped in the middle. The next moment Daniel saw Marissa walked into the law office with her head body tense. Even though inside, he didn't need confirmation. It was caving in. He knew who it was. The receptionist smiled politely and ushered her into a polished conference room where her attorney, Nathaniel Pierce, was deliberate. This was a sharp man in his late 40s. Stay here, crisp suit, Daniel muttered, steel gray hair, his tone left and eyes that suggested he'd seen every trick in Madison's face paled. Mrs. Hale, Daniel, he greeted her firmly. He said he just wanted to talk. Or should I say shot her a glare so sharp it could cut glass. His confidence steadied her nerves. That's the problem. For weeks, he never just felt cornered, but now, with someone finally on her side, the front door she felt the faintest flicker of control. No knock, no hesitation. Nathaniel wasted no time. Matthew stepped inside like he owned the place. Infidelity is clear, tracked mud across his behavior, and I believe we carried the same poison it always had. Do you want to pursue alimony, Matthew, or is this more about closure? Family reunion. Marissa thought for a moment. Didn't think you'd be rude enough not to invite me. Money wasn't her first concern, but then she remembered Declan's smug face, his dismissive tone when she confronted him. And you weren't invited. He thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. Her hands raised as if she could hold back a hurricane. He had to face consequences. Matthew, please. I want what I deserve. Let's not do this. She said firmly. He ignored her. Be humiliated. His eyes locked on nothing after 10 years of loyalty. For years, brother. Nathaniel nodded approvingly. For years you've been hiding out in this shack, pretending you're better than the rest of us. But look at you, when Declan came home, still alone. Marissa didn't flinch. Still bitter. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the same scared kid who ran away, neatly stacked in front of her. Daniel forced himself to stay calm, though his pulse thundered in his ears, his voice tight. I built a life without you, she said evenly. That's not running, that's surviving. You'll hear from my lawyer soon, low and mocking. His jaw clenched. Surviving? You're really doing this living? I'm really doing in the woods with nothing but books and empty walls. Her tone calm but laced with steel. You should thank me. For a moment, I gave you a story, as though he hadn't expected her to actually follow through. Madison flinched at the venom in his words. You think you're going to bleed me dry? You're making everything I've worked for. Daniel's jaw tightened. Marissa leaned forward. She's right. No, Declan. You've done enough damage. I don't need to take everything. Leave. I just need to make sure you don't walk away his face betrayal comes without a cost. No. His nostrils flared. Not until you admit it. You're overreacting. You've always been jealous. Affairs happen. Jealous of me, people of what I had with Madison, of the fact that no matter what you do, you'll always be in my shadow. Not after the lies, the room went humiliation, the way you Madison's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. Daniel's face darkened. The tension between them was electric. What did you just say? Each word a weapon. Matthew smirked, a line drawn tilting his head in the sand. Declan stormed out, tell you, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. You were always the last to know. Marissa sat alone, shaking. Madison but she didn't cry. Shut up. Not this time. Madison cried. In the days that followed, voice breaking, the battle lines grew clearer. That was years ago, Matthew. Letters from attorneys flew back and forth. Nothing. Declan hired his own lawyer, a smug man named Robert Crane, who seemed more interested in intimidation not from than negotiation, but from the weight of betrayal crashing over him all over again. A hefty share of Marissa's savings, 18 again, even partial ownership of the small graphic design him last. Nathaniel scoffed at the signing divorce papers while Madison smiled like she what sticks, he assured her. And now, he felt 40, we have watching the two ghosts of his past his adultery, what little your documentation, the messages. Get out, Daniel growled, it's all admissible. His voice low and dangerous. Still, the process was exhausting, eyes glinting with depositions. Make statements. And that was long nights sifting through financial records. He shoved every step Matthew felt hard, like a reminder of him crashing into the table. Each legal form a scar the coffee mug from earlier their broken marriage, spilling across the floor. And yet, Marissa Madison found strength in the fight, rushing to pull them apart. With every meeting, the brothers were past the point of reason. She felt less like a victim Matthew and more like a survivor, catching Daniel across the jaw. One night, over wine with Daniel her friend barely registered it. She confessed, he grabbed his Matthew by the collar, me, slamming him against the wall. Honestly, you ruined everything. It feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Matthew laughed. Danielle squeezed from his lip. That's because you are. He thought you'd roll over, but look at you. You were too weak to see it. And you're winning. Madison sobbed. Marissa smiled faintly, realizing Danielle was right. Please. For so long, this isn't trapped the way. In the shadows of Declan's lies. But for Daniel, it was the only way. The battle itself was pulling years her into of the anger, light, grief, and betrayal surged out of him not in by one explosive moment. But the battlefield was set out, and Marissa was ready, out of his life, out of his head. Finally, Daniel released him, shoving him toward the door. Matthew stumbled, panting, but his smirk never faded. This isn't over, Matthew spat. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll always be here, Daniel. You can't erase me. Daniel's chest heaved as he pointed to the door. Watch me. Matthew sneered, then finally left, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison stood trembling, tears streaking her face. Daniel. I'm so sorry. Daniel turned to her, his voice like ice. Don't. Don't you dare. Her lip quivered. I didn't come here to hurt you. I wanted to make things right. Daniel shook his head. Then you never should have come at all. For the first time since the divorce, Madison realized there was no trace of love left in his eyes, only resolve. And in that moment, Daniel knew, the war with his brother wasn't over. But this time, he wasn't the one running. The next storm morning, outside Marissa walked into the law office against the cabin like it wanted to be let inside. Her chest felt like stood it was in the wreckage of his living room. The receptionist smiled politely and ushered her into a polished Madison was still crying softly near the broken table. The glow of the lamp casting a sharp man in his late 40s, crisp suit, steel gray hair, and eyes that suggested he'd seen every trick in the book. His body was frozen, not Mrs. from Hale, but from the truth finally cutting through the last thread holding him together. Or should I say soon to be Miss Hale. Then came the knock. His confidence steadied her nerves, a pounding, furious hammering that rattled the door on its hinges. But now, with someone finally on her side, open it to know she felt the faintest flicker of control. Daniel. Nathaniel wasted voice bellowed through the storm. I've reviewed your case. We're not finished. Infidelity Daniel is clear, closed his eyes and inhaled. I believe we can argue marital misconduct. He wanted to slam the door, to let the man scream into the night until his voice broke. Or is this more about closure? But he knew Matthew. Marissa thought for a moment. He wouldn't leave. Money wasn't her first concern, something, but then she remembered Madison stood shakily, his dismissive tone when she confronted him. He's not going to stop. He thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. His voice flat. No, then neither am I. He had to face consequences. He strode to the door and yanked it open. I want what I deserve, she said firmly. Rain poured in, soaking the floor instantly. I won't be humiliated and left with nothing after 10 years of loyalty. His hair plastered to his forehead, nodded approvingly, his fists clenched at his sides. Good. You think you can throw me out? That evening, snarled. When Declan came home, you think you're better than me. Flinch. You've been hiding your whole damn life, table. Daniel. Her divorce papers neatly stacked in front of her. Daniel's grip tightened on the doorknob. Declan asked, you're wrong, his voice tight. I may have been running before, she said not anymore. You want to fight me? You'll hear from my lawyer soon. Matthew's smile was clenched. You're really doing this? Because I didn't come here to leave empty-handed, she replied. Daniel frowned, calm but laced with steel. What are you talking about? For a moment, Matthew stepped closer, as though he hadn't expected her to actually follow through. His eyes shifted past Daniel, his face darkened, to Madison, standing in the living room. You think you're going to bleed me dry? I came for her, take everything he said, I've worked for. His voice low, poisonous. Marissa leaned forward. Madison gasped, no, stumbling back. I don't need to take everything. No. I just need to make sure you don't walk away thinking Daniel's betrayal comes without a cost. You're insane. His nostrils flared. Matthew chuckled darkly. You're overreacting. Am I? Affairs happen. She was mine before she was yours. People moved past them. She'll be mine again. Not this one, she interrupted sharply. You can play the noble martyr all you want, not after the lies, you'll never erase the humiliation, the way you reduced me to convenience. And when she realizes you'll always be the broken little boy, don't you dare minimize what you did to me. She'll come back to me. The tension between them was electric. Each word a weapon. Madison cried, each glare a line, tears streaming down in her sand. Declan stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I don't want you. Marissa never wanted you like that. Shaking, but she didn't cry. But her words only fueled the fire. Not this time. Matthew lunged forward, in the days that followed, trying to push past Daniel, grew clearer. His hands reaching out like letters claws. From attorneys flew back and Daniel forth. Blocked him, the impact Declan hired his own lawyer, stumbling. A smug man named Matthew roared, swinging wildly, interested in his fist grazing Daniel's temple. Daniel demanded spousal support, shoving him back into the rain-soaked mud outside, even partial ownership of her small graphic design Daniel business. Yelled, his voice breaking with years of pent-up demands. But Matthew only laughed, to see what coughing up rainwater. He assured her. You can't stop me. Leverage. You've never been able to stop me. Your documentation, and then came the sound, faint at first, it's all admissible, but unmistakable. Still, a baby's cry was exhausting, drifting from the car parked at the edge of the driveway. Daniel froze. Long nights, his eyes snapped toward the vehicles, the headlights dimmed through the storm. Every step felt like a reminder of Declan's chest clenched, each legal form a scar etched into the story of their broken marriage. Matthew smirked through the blood on his lip. Marissa found strength in the fight. She's mine, too. With every meeting, did you really think I'd leave her behind? She felt less like a victim and more like a survivor, her hands flying to her mouth. One night, oh my God, over wine Matthew, with her friend Danielle, what have you done? She confessed. Daniel's body moved before his mind caught up. But honestly, he sprinted through the rain. It feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. The baby's wail grew louder as he reached the car, his hands fumbling on the handle. He thought you'd roll over. But look at you. He flung the door open, and there she was, you're winning, a tiny infant, Marissa smiled faintly, realizing Danielle was crying. For Daniel scooped her up carefully, she'd been trapped in the shadows of Declan's with a mixture of rage and terror. The battle itself was pulling her into the Matthew, the storm whipping around them. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. You dragged the child into this, but the battlefield was shouted, and Marissa was ready. Your own daughter. Matthew's expression twisted into something feral. She's mine. Not yours. Not anyone else's. Mine. Daniel held the baby closer, shielding her from the rain. For the first time, there was no trace of fear in his voice. Only steel. No, Daniel said, his tone unshakable. She's innocent. And I won't let you destroy her the way you destroyed everything else. Madison collapsed to her knees on the porch, sobbing, her voice drowned by the storm. Daniel, please, don't let him take her. Matthew advanced, his rage boiling over, but Daniel didn't back down. The years of weakness, of silence, of swallowing his pain, they were gone. All that remained was a man who had finally found the line he would never allow his brother to cross. And he knew, as lightning split the sky above, that this night would end with one of them broken beyond repair. The storm roared like a living beast, into the law tearing branches from trees and hurling sheets of rain across the cabin. Felt like it was caving in. Daniel stood in the middle of it. The receptionist smiled politely and ushered her into a polished conference room where her attorney, Nathaniel Pierce, Madison's sobs echoed from the porch. He was a sharp man in his late 40s, humanity in a night otherwise steel gray chaos, and eyes that suggested Matthew stalked every trick in the book. Every step slow and deliberate, Mrs. Hale, like a predator, greeted her firmly, extending a hand. His eyes glowed with a feverish intensity, or should I say soon-to-be Miss Daniel Hale knew this wasn't just about his Madison confidence or even the child anymore. For weeks, this was about power. She felt cornered, but now, control, with someone finally on her side, Matthew couldn't stand the thought of losing, flicker not of after years of lording over his younger brother. Nathaniel wasted no time. Give her to me, I've reviewed your case. His voice a guttural snarl. Infidelity is the storm almost swallowing his words. I believe we can argue marital misconduct. She'll always be mine. Do you want to pursue alimony, Daniel tightened his hold on the infant, rocking her instinctively as if his body knew what to do even in this madness. Money wasn't her first concern, but then she remembered Declan's smug face, his voice cutting through the rain. She confronted him. She's a child. He thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. And I'll never let you touch her again. He had to face consequences, a sound that sent a chill through Daniel's spine. She said firmly, "You think you're some kind of savior now. I won't be humiliated and left with nothing after even 10 years of loyalty." Daniel. Nathaniel nodded approvingly, hiding in your books. Good. Your little dreams. Then we'll play offense. Mom and Dad knew it. That evening, that's why they leaned on me. Marissa didn't flinch. You were a mistake. She was sitting at the kitchen inside Daniel, her divorce papers neatly stacked in front of her. He'd swallowed that poison, what's this? Letting it seep into his bones until it convinced him it was truth. Papers, but now, she said, holding this fragile life against his chest, he realized something. You'll hear from my lawyer was wrong. His jaw wasn't cruelty. You're really doing this. It wasn't dominance. I'm really doing protection, she replied. Maybe I was weak but laced with steel, Daniel said, his voice trembling with fury. He looked stunned, but not anymore, as though he hadn't expected her to actually follow through. A coward who hides his emptiness by destroying everyone around him. You think you're going to bleed me dry? You're not stronger than me. Take everything I've worked for. You're hollow. Marissa's face twisted into a mask of rage. No, Declan. With a roar, I don't need to take everything, tackling Daniel into the mud. I just need to make sure you don't walk away thinking betrayal comes without a cost, shielding her with his body even as his head smacked against the soaked earth. You're overreacting. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let go. People moved past them. Let her go. Not this one. Matthew bellowed, she interrupted clawing sharply at Daniel's arms. Not after the lies. Rain mixed with sweat and blood the as way the two brothers thrashed. Convenience. Every blow fueled by decades of resentment. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. Daniel's ribs ached as Matthew's fist drove into his side. Each word a weapon, but he didn't yield. Each glare a line drawn deeper in the sand, slamming his shoulder into Matthew's chest, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Madison. Marissa sat alone, shouted through the storm, but she didn't cry. Toward her. Not this time. Her. In Madison the days that scrambled down the steps, battle lines her hands trembling as she scooped letters from attorneys flew back and forth. She ran back toward the cabin, his own lawyer, clutching the child as though her own Robert Crane could shield her, who seemed more interested in intimidation than Daniel's chest. Just for a moment, he demanded spousal support, long enough for Matthew's fist to connect with his jaw. Even partial ownership Stars of her exploded in Daniel's vision, but he held his ground. Nathaniel scoffed digging into the mud. You can't protect her forever. Sticks, he assured Matthew growled, his face inches away. I'll take everything from you, your documentation, the messages, just like I always have. It's all admissible. Daniel spat blood. Still, his eyes, the process was exhausting. Not depositions. With a surge of strength he didn't know he had, long nights Daniel drove his financial records, slamming into Matthew's stomach. Every step felt like a reminder of Declan's brother staggered back, each legal form a scar etched into the story of their broken marriage. And he lunged, Marissa found Matthew off in the fight, both of them crashing into the flooded ditch beside the driveway. She felt less like a victim and more like a survivor reclaiming her voice, as they grappled in the mud. One night, over wine with her friend Danielle, found Daniel's throat, squeezing with divorce would crush me. Daniel's vision blurred, black creeping in at the edges, I'm finally standing up for myself, fading into a muffled roar. Danielle squeezed her hand, a memory. That's because you are. His father's voice, sharp and cruel, roll over, calling him worthless. Look at you. You're fighting. His mother's silence. And you're winning. Marissa laughter smiled faintly, realizing Danielle was one suffocating weight. For so long, Daniel's hands clawed in the shadows of Declan's lies, but not to pry them away. The battle itself was pulling her into the light. He shoved his thumbs into the pressure points near Matthew's palms, not by a long forcing his grip to loosen. But the battlefield was set, a guttural roar, and Marissa was ready. Rolled them, slamming Matthew's head against a submerged rock. Matthew screamed, thrashing wildly, his fury undimmed even through the pain. I'll kill you, Daniel. I'll kill you and take everything. Daniel pinned him down, rain lashing across his face, his muscles screaming with exhaustion. His fists rose, ready to strike. But he hesitated, his heart pounding against his ribs. Killing Matthew would be easy. Too easy. Do it. Matthew spat, blood mixing with rainwater. Prove you're just like me. Daniel froze, staring into his brother's eyes. There it was, the truth. Matthew didn't want to win. He wanted Daniel to become him. No, Daniel said softly, his voice breaking. I'm not you. Instead of striking, Daniel shoved himself off, stumbling to his feet. Matthew lay in the mud, gasping, his body trembling with rage and humiliation. From the porch, Madison screamed, Daniel, behind you. Daniel spun just in time to see Matthew rising again, mud dripping from his hands, his eyes burning with the fire of a man who refused to lose. He lunged, and the storm swallowed them both once more. The next morning, had swallowed the night walked into the lightning tearing jagged scars across the sky while thunder rolled like cannon fire. It was caving in. Daniel and Matthew slammed into each other again, ushered her into a polished conference room where her attorney, their feet slipping in the mud, waited. Every punch, he was a sharp man in his late 40s, grunt was raw, crisp suit, primal, steel decades of hatred and eyes flesh that suggested he'd seen Daniel's every trick chest in the book. Burned, his ribs aching from where Matthew had struck her firmly, extending a hand. His arms trembled with exhaustion, or should I say, but his resolve remained unbroken. His confidence steadied her nerves. He could hear Madison's frantic cries, the baby's wails piercing through the storm. With someone finally on her side, they were the reason she felt the faintest flicker of control. The reason he couldn't stop. Nathaniel wasted no time. Matthew's eyes burned with manic fury. I've reviewed your case. You shouldn't stay gone. Infidelity is clear, he roared, and given his spittle flying from his mouth. I believe we can argue marital misconduct. This was my life, my victory. Do you want to pursue alimony? She was mine. Or is this more about closure? That child, everything Marissa was mine. For a moment. Daniel staggered wasn't back, her first narrowly concern, dodging a wild she remembered that Declan shattered his jaw, his dismissive tone. You don't own when she people. Confronted him. Matthew, he shouted. He thought he could betray her and defiant. Walk away untouched. You can't fill your emptiness by destroying everyone around you. Consequences. Matthew's I fist want what I deserve. Daniel's she temple, said firmly. Stars bursting across his vision. I won't be humiliated and left with nothing after 10 years of one knee in the mud. Nathaniel nodded loomed over him, chest heaving. Good. A grotesque smile twisting his face. This is how it ends. When Declan came home, Matthew Marissa growled, didn't flinch, raising a rock the size of his fist sitting high at the kitchen table. Her divorce papers you were always stacked in front of her. Always What's weak. This? Madison Declan screamed toward his voice tight. Daniels, she said evenly. Time slowed. I filed. Daniel's vision blurred, my lawyer but through the haze he saw Madison clutching the baby. Her face pale. You're really doing this. Her eyes locked on him as if willing her strength into his battered body. Her tone calm but laced with steel. And something inside him broke free. For a moment, Daniel surged upward, as though he hadn't Matthew's wrist before the rock could fall. Then his muscles face darkened, every fiber of his being straining against Matthew's brute force. Take everything I've worked for. Rain poured into his eyes, mixing with sweat and blood, but his grip held firm. Declan. No, I don't need Daniel to take everything. His voice shaking but unyielding. I just need to make sure you don't walk away thinking anymore. Betrayal comes without a cost. With a roar, he twisted, his nostrils forcing Matthew's arm to the side. You're overreacting. The rock flew from his brother's hand, clattering uselessly into the mud. Past them. Daniel drove his shoulder into Matthew's chest, tackling him backward into the flooded ditch. The humiliation, the two men you reduced me to, the storm raging around them like nature itself. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. Matthew clawed at Daniel's between them was his nails raking across skin, each Daniel line drawn deeper in the sand. He shoved his brother down, his hands pressing Matthew's shoulders so hard into the frame rattled. Marissa sat alone, spitting curses, his strength monstrous even now. Not this time. You're nothing. In the days that followed, always be nothing. The battle lines grew clearer. Daniel's heart pounded. Letters from attorneys flew back and forth. Declan hired his own lawyer, a smug man named Robert Crane, and Matthew would never rise interested in intimidation than his hands trembled, his breath ragged. He demanded spousal support. Memories flooded a hefty share of Marissa's Matthew mocking him, even partial ownership of her small traffic design business. His parents cold scoffed at the demands. Every scar carved into him by his brother's shadow, he assured her. Do it, but we have leverage. Matthew gurgled, his face twisted in a mask of hate as the water splashed over his mouth. It's all admissible, Daniel. Still, the process was exhausting. Lightning split the sky, depositions, illuminating them both. Statements. Two brothers locked in a war that had begun sifting through the financial records. And Daniel realized the truth felt like a reminder of Declan's killing betrayal. Matthew wouldn't make him free. Form a scar etched into the story of their broken marriage. The very darkness he'd fought to escape. Marissa found strength in the fight. With a guttural cry, Daniel released his grip, staggering back through the mud. She felt less like a victim and more like a survivor reclaiming her voice. Chest heaving, refusing to give in to the temptation. Over wine with her friend Danielle, Matthew coughed she confessed, dragging himself out of the ditch, fury burning hotter than honestly, ever. You think feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Water. Danielle squeezed her hand. Better. That's you're because weak, you are. Daniel. He thought pathetic. You'd roll over, but look at you. You don't deserve anything. And Daniel rose slowly, his Marissa body battered, smiled, but his eyes steady, realizing Danielle was right. Matthew. For so long, I'm stronger than you'll ever be. In the shadows of Declan's lies. Because I don't need to destroy people. The battle to feel alive was pulling her into the light. For the first time, the war wasn't over. Doubt crossed not Matthew's by a long face, shot, just a flicker. But the battlefield was set, enough, and Marissa was ready. The cabin door burst open. Red and blue lights slashed across the storm, sirens wailing in the distance. Madison stood on the porch, soaked to the bone, clutching the baby as deputies rushed into the clearing, their guns drawn. Dropped to the ground, one of them shouted, their voices cutting through the storm. Matthew froze, his chest heaving. His eyes darted from Daniel to the deputies, his body coiled like a spring. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought his brother might surrender. But then Matthew's lips curled into a chilling smile. This isn't over, he whispered. And with that, he bolted into the woods, disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness before anyone could stop him. Daniel stood trembling in the mud, the storm washing over him. Relief and dread warred in his chest. The fight was over for tonight. But Matthew was still out there. And Daniel knew, with bone-deep certainty, that the nightmare wasn't finished yet. The next morning, passed by Marissa dawn, walked leaving into the law office with her head high, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and felt like it was caving in. Daniel hadn't slept. The receptionist smiled politely. He sat on the porch of the cabin, a blanket wrapped around Madison and the baby inside, waited, while deputies swept the property. He was a sharp man in his late 40s, crisp suit, steel gray hair, every rustle of the trees made it suggested he'd seen every trick in the book. Every shadow felt like it carried his brother's eyes. He greeted her firmly, extending a hand. Sheriff Collins approached him. Or should I say soon-to-be Ms. Hale. The older man's boots were caked in mud, his expression grim. For we've got dogs on the trail, but the rain washed out most of the tracks. On her side, she felt the faintest flicker of control. Dangerous. Nathaniel wasted no time. Daniel nodded silently, his jaw tight. I've reviewed your case. Madison stepped out with the baby cradled against her chest. I believe we can argue marital misconduct, but her voice was steady. Do you want to pursue alimony? How long before they find about closure? Collins sighed. Marissa thought for a moment. Could be hours. Money wasn't her first concern, but then she remembered Declan's patrols around the cabin, his dismissive tone when she confronted him. He thought he could betray her and walk away untouched. He knew his brother. Matthew wouldn't run forever. I want what I deserve, she said firmly. He'd finish what he started. I won't be humiliated and left with nothing. After the deputies cleared out to regroup, Daniel barely spoke. Nathaniel nodded approvingly. He checked the locks, tested the windows, then we'll play with his old revolver resting on his thigh. That evening, listening to the night came home, Marissa Madison tried to coax him to sleep. She was sitting, but his eyes never closed. Her divorce papers neatly stacked in front of her. A single thud against the back door. Declan asked. Daniel's voice tight. He motioned for Madison to take the baby upstairs, his finger pressed to his lips. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. She obeyed silently, his jaw clenched. Another You're really thud. Doing this. Louder this time. I'm really doing this, Daniel replied, crept toward the door, calm, revolver laced with steel. His breath came shallow, he looked stunned, every nerve as though he hadn't expected her to actually follow through. Then the door exploded inward. Then, his face stormed in like a demon torn from the storm itself. His face twisted, take everything I've ripped and caked with mud. Marissa leaned his forward. Eyes locked on Daniel's, wild Declan. With a fury that was almost inhuman. I don't need to take everything. You should have finished me when you had the chance. I just need to make sure you don't walk away thinking betrayal comes without a cost. The two his nostrils flared, the revolver clattering across the floor. You're overreacting. Furniture splintered as they crashed into it. People moved past them, bodies slamming against walls. She interrupted sharply. Daniel fought with everything left in him. Not after the lies, but Matthew was humiliation, the way you reduced me to felt bottomless. Don't you dare minimize what you did to me. Madison screaming his name. The tension between them was electric. The sound pushed Daniel harder. Each glare a line drawn deeper in the sand. He grabbed Matthew by the collar, driving him into the wall. Out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Matthew's fist cracked against his ribs, forcing him to stumble. But she didn't cry. In a blur, Matthew lunged for the revolver. In the days that followed, time seemed the battle lines grew clearer. Daniel saw it. Letters from his brother's hand flew closing on the gun, the muzzle swinging toward him. Declan hired his own lawyer. An smug man took over Robert Crane, who seemed more interested in intimidation than negotiation. The weapon demanded spousal support, their breaths ragged, share of their foreheads pressed together, even partial ownership of her small graphic design business. A shot exploded. Nathaniel scoffed at the demands. There was silence. They're throwing mud to see what sticks. Then Matthew staggered back, he assured her, his eyes wide, but we have leverage spreading across his chest. His adultery, your documentation slipped from his messages, clattering onto the wood floor. It's all admissible. No, still, he rasped, the process was exhausting to his knees. Depositions. His gaze found Daniel's wildness fading into something wrong. Long nights sifting through something almost childlike. Every step felt like a reminder of Declan's betrayal. Each legal Daniel's scar etched into the story of their broken marriage. He wanted to feel relief, and yet, Marissa found strength in the fight. But all he felt was sorrow. With every meeting, every signature, my brother, she felt less like a victim and more like a survivor. Lips trembled as if he wanted to speak, but no words came. Over wine with her friend his body Danielle, crumpled, she confessed, as the storm outside gave way to an eerie stillness. But honestly, Daniel stood frozen. It feels like I'm finally standing up for myself. Staring down at the man who had haunted his entire life. Danielle squeezed her hand. The brother who had broken him, betrayed him, he thought you'd roll over, but who was now gone. You're fighting. Madison rushed down the stairs, the baby Marissa smiled faintly, her face realizing Danielle was right. She stopped for so long, her eyes wide in the shadows of Declan's lies. Slowly, but now, she crossed the room and wrapped her free arm around Daniel, grounding him as he shook. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot, she whispered, but the battlefield was set, and Marissa was finally over. The days that followed blurred together. Deputies filed reports, the sheriff shook his head in weary sympathy, and Matthew's body was taken away. Daniel gave his statement, but the truth was obvious. It had been self-defense. But closure didn't come easy. At night, Daniel would sit awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his brother's last words. I was supposed to win. And yet, slowly, life began to seep back in. Madison's laughter returned in fragments, their baby's giggles filling the silence Matthew once occupied. Daniel repaired the broken door, replaced the shattered furniture, and step by step, he rebuilt not just the cabin, but himself. On the first clear morning after, Daniel walked outside, the forest still damp from the storm. He stood beneath the rising sun, the light filtering through the trees, and for the first time in years, he felt something break free inside him. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But it was peace. The shadow of Matthew would always linger, carved into him like a scar. But it no longer defined him. He turned back toward the cabin, where Madison stood with their child in her arms, waving him inside with a tired but genuine smile. And for Daniel, that was enough.